If Lucas does not have surgery within 10 days, he may never be able to walk on his own again. Dr. Samuel Grant's voice filled the cold white hospital room as a financial officer placed an insurance denial letter in front of Claire Bennett. A few lines of text had transformed her younger brother from an intern crushed beneath collapsing scaffolding into an unauthorized trespasser who had caused his own injuries. But the person who signed that conclusion had no idea the lie was already leaving evidence inside the wedding dress Claire was about to sell. Claire looked through the glass. Lucas lay on his side with his lower body immobilized, his face turning pale as the pain medication began to wear off. Dr. Grant pointed to the images of his spine. "We handled the emergency and stabilized him, but the pressure on the nerves is getting worse. Early reconstructive surgery will reduce the risk of permanent damage." The financial officer spoke carefully. "The hospital requires a deposit before we can schedule the procedure. The insurance company just denied the claim." Claire opened the letter. The insurer cited a report from Caldwell Urban Group. According to the report, Lucas was neither an employee nor an authorized intern at the Riverside Renewal Project. He had entered the construction site without permission, violated a restricted area, and was personally responsible for his injuries. Lucas turned his face toward his sister. "Take me home. I can wait." "Wait for what? For your legs to get weaker?" Claire took his hand, hiding the tremor in her voice. "I am not going to let you give up your ability to walk because somebody wrote a lie on a piece of paper." She went to Mark Collins, the man who had once promised to stand beside her through every crisis. Claire's former fiancé now handled claims for the insurance company connected to Caldwell Urban. Inside his office, Mark pushed a stack of papers toward her. "I am not denying that we once loved each other, but the current record is against Lucas. My brother has an internship badge, work schedules, and messages from his supervisor. None of that appears in the official file." Mark pointed to the signature line. "If Lucas signs a statement admitting that he entered the site without authorization and caused his own accident, the insurer will approve a humanitarian payment. You will have the deposit immediately instead of spending years in court." Claire read the amount. It was just enough to get Lucas scheduled for surgery. But in exchange, he would carry the blame for the rest of his life and give up his right to challenge what happened. "You want a man lying in a hospital bed to sign a confession saying the collapse that crushed him was his fault?" Mark leaned back in his chair. "I am giving you the only way out. A small alterations shop and a woman without a lawyer are not going to beat a corporation worth hundreds of millions of dollars." Claire pushed the document back toward him. "Then I will find another way." Mark's polite smile disappeared. "Your pride could leave Lucas in a wheelchair." "No." "This signature would make my brother responsible for something he did not do." At Bennett Bridal Repairs, Claire sold her backup embroidery machine, her personal jewelry, and canceled a large order so she could return the customer's deposit. She was still short by an amount that 10 days of work could never cover. Then a young bride came to pick up a dress Claire had altered. Embarrassed, the woman admitted that her fiancé had just lost several work shifts and she did not have enough money to pay the remaining balance. Claire looked at the bag of hospital bills beside her. Then she handed over the dress anyway. "Wear it on your wedding day. After that, pay me little by little, whatever you can afford each month. But you need the money. I need money. That does not mean I have to take away somebody else's happy day." After the shop closed, Claire pulled down a dusty box. Inside was the wedding dress she had made for herself from silk her mother had left behind. Helen Bennett had embroidered silver irises across the fabric and sewn a small hidden pocket into the lining. "To keep something that must never be lost," her mother had once said. After Mark ended their engagement while Claire's family was sinking into debt, she folded the dress away and never opened the box again. During the frantic days of running between the hospital and the shop, Claire had slipped some of Lucas's documents into that hidden pocket for safekeeping. Exhaustion and panic made her forget they were still there. The next morning, Claire carried the dress to Second Chance Pawn. Rosa Martinez unfolded each layer of silk with careful hands. 3 wealthy women browsing jewelry nearby noticed the unworn wedding dress. One of them looked at Claire's ringless hand and laughed. "No bride wants a dress from a failed marriage. Maybe you should sell it by the pound." Claire tightened her grip on the counter. She did not tell them about Mark, and she did not ask for sympathy. She looked directly at the woman. "I am not selling a dream. I am buying my brother a chance to walk again." Rosa closed the jewelry tray. "In my store, customers are not objects for you to put a price on. Please leave if you cannot treat people with respect." When the women were gone, Rosa inspected every stitch and offered Claire the highest advance the law allowed. "I cannot hold it forever, but I will extend the deadline as far as the law permits, and I will notify you before I put it up for sale." The money was still not enough. The redemption deadline passed while Claire was repeatedly denied loans. The Caldwell Foundation was looking for handmade pieces for a fundraising auction benefiting patients at Grand Franklin Hospital, so Rosa submitted photographs of the dress, hoping the sale price might help Claire cover the remaining medical costs. At the Caldwell estate, Ethan stopped when he saw the photograph. The silver irises looked almost identical to a symbol Anna had once drawn beneath her private letters. His late wife used to say that irises represented hope after a long winter. Margaret Caldwell looked over her son's shoulder. "That embroidery reminds me of someone." Before Ethan could ask who, the meeting began. That evening, he purchased the dress for several times its estimated value, intending to display it in a charitable exhibition named after Anna. He had no idea who had owned the dress. He certainly did not know that it contained documents connected to one of his own company's projects. 2 days later, a restoration specialist was examining a loose seam in the lining. When she gently pulled at the fabric, a small cloth pocket fell onto the table. "Stop," Ethan said. "That may contain personal property. Nobody opens another seam or copies anything." The pocket had already come slightly open. Inside was a Riverside internship badge bearing the name Lucas Bennett. The expiration date was still valid. Beside it were the insurance denial letter, a label embroidered with the name Helen Bennett, a strand of silver thread, and a wrinkled handwritten note. "Mom, I am about to sell the last thing you left me, but I cannot let Lucas lose his legs." Ethan saw the name Riverside Renewal and immediately requested access to the accident file. The official conclusion in the company system said Lucas had been a trespasser. At the bottom was Ethan Caldwell's electronic signature. The system showed that he had approved the summary only 3 minutes after it reached his inbox. Ethan stared at the wedding dress inside the display case. For the first time, something that reminded him of Anna did not bring him peace. It forced him to look directly at the consequence of a signature he barely remembered making. That afternoon, Ethan arrived at Bennett Bridal Repairs with Thomas Reed, an attorney assigned to preserve the evidence. Claire was removing the hem from an old dress when a black car stopped outside. Ethan placed the cloth pocket on the counter. These were found inside the lining. "I came to return them and ask permission to begin a formal review. I can also pay all of Lucas's medical expenses today." Claire looked at the name on his business card. Then she pulled out the insurance denial letter. Ethan Caldwell, the man who signed the conclusion saying my brother was a trespasser. I signed a summary marked as legally verified. I never saw this badge or the original records. "That is exactly why your signature is dangerous." Claire pushed the card back toward him. "My brother does not need charity from the man who signed a lie. He needs the truth restored. The payment does not have to require closing the case. Then put that in writing and let an independent lawyer review it. I will not trade Lucas's rights for a check." Ethan did not argue. He instructed Thomas to document the return of the materials, preserve sealed copies, and make sure the Bennett family retained every legal right to challenge the accident. Before leaving, Ethan looked at Claire. "You are right. I did not create the report, but I turned it into an official decision." Back at Caldwell Urban Headquarters, Ethan ordered Vanessa Rhodes to provide the internship records, construction site, camera footage, safety reports, and the complete insurance file. Vanessa remained calm. Lucas Bennett was never a valid intern. Claire may have placed those documents inside the dress to get access to you. Mark was brought into the meeting and supported her claim. "She is desperate. I had a relationship with Claire, so I understand how she uses emotional pressure." Ethan placed the internship badge on the table. "The expiration date is still valid. If this badge was stolen or never collected, there should still be a record showing when it was issued." "Not every printed badge proves an employment relationship," Vanessa replied. "Let legal handle this before you turn it into a crisis." Ethan turned the system over to an independent technical team. They recovered hidden server logs. Lucas's name had appeared on the official internship list on the morning of the accident. It had not disappeared before the scaffolding collapse, as the company report claimed. His record was deleted exactly 12 minutes after the ambulance left the construction site. The deletion had been performed using administrator privileges belonging to the legal office. Ethan rotated the monitor toward Vanessa. If Lucas never worked at Riverside, why did someone need to delete his name 12 minutes after the scaffolding collapsed? Vanessa did not answer Ethan's question. She stared at the deletion log on the screen and said it might have been nothing more than an administrative correction. But Ethan was done accepting answers that arrived neatly packaged. "Lock down a copy of the server and send the data to an outside auditing firm," he told Thomas. "From this moment on, I am removing myself from any vote connected to the accident. Riverside will partially suspend operations until the safety inspection is complete." Vanessa shot to her feet. "The refinancing deal depends on our schedule. You could cost this company hundreds of millions of dollars over an intern whose status has not even been verified. A project cannot be saved by continuing to hide the reason someone was injured." At St. Catherine's Hospital, the 10-day deadline was still running. Ethan offered to pay Lucas's medical bills personally, but Claire refused. If your money turns corporate responsibility into the kindness of a billionaire, Lucas will still be the person blamed for what happened. After consulting with Claire's attorney, Caldwell Urban issued an unconditional guarantee covering Lucas's medical expenses. The agreement contained no confidentiality requirement. It did not force the Bennett family to surrender their right to sue, and it did not state that Lucas was responsible for the accident. Final responsibility would be determined by the investigation. Claire read every line before accepting it. "I am agreeing because this is a temporary obligation of the company, not a gift." Lucas was scheduled for surgery on the 10th day. When Claire told him, he was not as relieved as she expected. "You are selling everything because of me. I am protecting your future, but it still has to be a future I get to make decisions about." Claire fell silent. She had become so used to protecting Lucas that she had not realized she was beginning to carry his voice for him too. Vanessa and Mark began fighting back. They claimed Claire had deliberately hidden the documents inside the wedding dress. Mark publicly admitted that he and Claire had once been engaged, but portrayed himself as someone she had manipulated. Stories spread that Claire had planted the paperwork so she could gain access to Ethan and demand money in exchange for silence. 3 clients canceled appointments in a single morning. One bride demanded her deposit back because she did not want her name associated with the woman the media was calling a billionaire's blackmailer. Bennett Bridal Repairs was suddenly facing the possibility of closing. Rosa did not argue with reporters. Instead, she turned over the video from the day Claire pawned the dress, the intake form, photographs showing its original condition, and the sealing records. The security footage clearly showed that the bulge in the lining already existed before the dress was sealed and before the Caldwell Foundation ever selected it. "I lost my first store because of my husband's medical bills," Rosa said. "I know what someone looks like when they are down to the last thing they can sell." She was not staging anything. She was trying to survive without giving up her dignity. Rosa's evidence weakened the first accusation. Then Claire noticed something else when Ethan showed her the construction site photograph that had been used in the legal report. "Zoom in on Lucas's safety harness," she said. Claire understood fabric structure better than most people. She immediately noticed that the woven pattern on one section of the strap repeated in exactly the same way as the section beside it. Real fabric did not repeat thread for thread like that. The orange stitching, issued only to Riverside interns, stopped abruptly. The spot where the internship logo should have appeared had been covered by a copied patch of fabric. "I cannot prove who changed this image," Claire said, "but fabric does not repeat every thread like that. Have an expert examine it." The analysis confirmed that the photograph had been altered after it was uploaded into the legal department's system. The internship logo had been concealed. The file modification occurred before the report was sent to Ethan for his signature. Ethan ordered Mark to produce the original photograph and remove himself from the case because of his conflict of interest. Mark said nothing during the meeting. That evening, he found Claire inside her nearly empty alterations shop. "I can make sure the medical bills are paid. I can restore your business. I can even guarantee you an apartment and a large settlement." Claire looked at him. "What do you want in return?" You confirm that the documents inside the dress were only a misunderstanding, and you leave my name out of this. Lucas gets treatment. You keep your store. Nobody has to bring down an entire corporation. Claire placed her scissors on the table. You knew Lucas had an internship badge, did you not? Mark avoided her eyes. I knew there was a badge. That is different from knowing whether his paperwork had been completed. You are asking me to sign another lie because the first lie is no longer strong enough. You are sacrificing Lucas's future just to prove that you are right. No, signing a false confession is what would take away my brother's future. Mark left. He returned to Vanessa. His last chance to hand over the truth was gone. The next morning, Dr. Grant called Claire to the hospital. Lucas's application for assistance from the Ethan Caldwell Patient Relief Fund had been denied because the fund supposedly had no money left. But public reports showed that the foundation was still receiving millions of dollars in donations. When Margaret Caldwell heard what had happened, she demanded to see the financial records. She discovered that Vanessa and the newer board members had removed her spending authority long ago. Margaret took Ethan and Claire to Anna's private archive. Inside boxes numbered in Anna's handwriting, they found a letter addressed to Helen Bennett, a sketch of silver irises, a photograph of Helen altering a dress for Anna, and a proposal reserving part of the foundation's budget for families affected by workplace accidents. Claire read the letter. Anna thanked Helen for altering her clothes free of charge during the months of her treatment, when her body was changing and her old dresses no longer fit. Helen never made me feel like a helpless patient, Anna had written. She only asked me how I wanted to see myself. Claire touched the silver iris embroidery in Anna's sketch. My mother never told me about this. Ethan stared at the photograph of his wife smiling beside Helen. He finally understood that he had not bought the wedding dress only because it reminded him of Anna. Two women from completely different worlds had once helped each other without forcing either one to lower her head before the other. My mother and Anna understood kindness better than we do, Claire said. They helped each other without turning the either person into a debt. For the first time, the confrontation between Claire and Ethan gave way to genuine respect. But beneath the letter was a proposal Anna herself had signed. A portion of the fund was supposed to be reserved specifically for families of workplace accident victims, families exactly like the Bennetts. The auditors followed the money. Funds intended for patients had been redirected into something labeled media and brand consulting. The company receiving the payments had an address connected to the office of one of Vanessa's close associates. Several invoices had no matching product, campaign, or actual service. Vanessa claimed that publicity helped attract donors. Ethan froze the related accounts and turned the records over to the forensic auditing team. His expression was no longer only angry. He was hurt. Anna's name had been used to deny help to the very people she had intended to protect. At Riverside, Caleb Ross received an order to destroy paper copies of construction logs under what was described as the company's data retention policy. Vanessa reminded him that his wife needed medical insurance and that his family's retirement depended on Caldwell Urban. Caleb stared at his own signature on the false report. He had remained silent when Lucas was turned into a trespasser. But this time, deleting evidence would turn that silence into a new act of concealment. He did not call Claire or Ethan because he was afraid his phone was being monitored. Instead, Caleb secretly contacted Rosa and asked to meet at Second Chance after closing. That night, Claire, Ethan, and the independent attorney sat around an old table inside the pawn shop. Caleb placed a paper shift log, printed copies of Lucas's warning emails, and a memory card on the table. Lucas was an intern, he said. He discovered that the braces did not meet safety standards and told the workers to get off the platform. When the structure started shaking, Lucas pushed Miguel out of the way and was trapped under the steel frame. Claire stared at him. Then why did you sign a report saying my brother was trespassing? Caleb lowered his head. Vanessa told me that if I refused, I would lose my job, my insurance, and my pension. I chose my family by making your family pay the price. Ethan did not promise him immunity. You will still have to answer for that signature. But while you cooperate, the company is not allowed to retaliate against you or cancel your family's insurance. The memory card came from a secondary camera that had never synchronized with the main server. The video opened with Lucas wearing complete internship safety equipment. His harness had the orange stitching. The logo was clearly visible. Lucas bent down to inspect one of the braces. Then he shouted for the workers to leave the platform. When the floor began to shake, Lucas rushed forward and pushed Miguel across the safety barrier. The steel frame collapsed onto Lucas's back seconds later. The video Caldwell Urban had submitted to the insurance company had been cut off before Lucas's warning. The data on the memory card confirmed that the original recording had been created before the legal report and had never been altered. Claire covered her mouth as she watched her brother disappear beneath the steel. Ethan stood completely still. The man his signature had officially labeled a trespasser had risked his own life to save one of Caldwell Urban's workers. Caleb looked at the screen. That video proves Lucas saved someone, but I also know who ordered us to turn him into a trespasser. At that moment, an emergency alert appeared on Thomas's phone. Vanessa and Mark had just sent a file to the press accusing Claire of extortion only hours before the auction at Grand Franklin. They planned to stand on a stage bearing Anna Caldwell's name, publicly deny Claire's accusations, and protect the Riverside refinancing deal. "Cancel the gala," Margaret said. Ethan looked at the wedding dress being placed inside its glass display case. Then he looked at the frozen image of Lucas saving Miguel. No. Finish verifying everything. If they choose to lie in front of the donors they deceived, then the truth will be presented in front of those same people. Caleb touched the false report carrying his own signature. "Tomorrow, the person who ordered me to lie will stand on a stage and speak in Anna Caldwell's name." He looked at Claire. "And this time, I will not stay silent." The following night, the wedding dress stood inside a glass case at the center of the Grand Franklin ballroom, its silver iris embroidery shimmering beneath the crystal lights. Hundreds of donors, board members, reporters, and hospital representatives faced the stage. From his hospital bed at St. Catherine's, Lucas watched everything on his phone. His surgery was scheduled for the next morning. Claire entered with her own attorney, Rosa, Margaret, and Caleb. The site manager carried a box containing paper, shift logs, and the memory card. Claire wore a dark blue dress she had altered herself, with a single line of silver thread stitched along the cuff. She paused for only a moment in front of the glass case. The wedding dress no longer represented a promise Mark had broken. Tonight, it would open the way for the truth. But before Ethan could take the stage, Vanessa picked up the microphone. "Caldwell Urban is being exploited by a woman who knows how to manipulate public sympathy." A murmur swept through the ballroom. Vanessa claimed that Claire had deliberately hidden documents inside the dress, that Lucas had never been an intern, that Caleb had changed his testimony for money, and that Ethan had allowed his grief over Anna to overpower his judgment. Mark immediately handed reporters an edited settlement proposal that made it appear Claire had demanded money, an apartment, and medical expenses in exchange for silence. Claire did not cry. She did not even look at Mark. She walked to the table in front of the display case and placed 4 items on it one by one. Lucas's internship badge, the insurance denial letter, the Helen Bennett label, and the old spool of silver thread. "I am not here asking to become rich, and I am not waiting for Mr. Caldwell to rescue me. I am asking for Lucas to be recognized as a legitimate worker, for the insurance company to fulfill its obligations, for Riverside to undergo a proper safety inspection, for Anna's fund to return to its original purpose, and for whoever falsified these records to be held responsible." Rosa presented the intake video from Second Chance. The date and time were clear. The footage showed her examining the dress lining and sealing the garment before it was ever selected for the Caldwell auction. The hidden pocket had existed before Ethan even knew Claire Bennett's name. Margaret then produced Anna's letter and the sketch of the silver irises, confirming that Helen had once altered clothing for her daughter-in-law. Anna herself had chosen the iris as the symbol of her wish to help families affected by workplace accidents. Ethan spoke next. "I purchased the dress because I recognized a symbol my wife used. At the time, I had no idea it belonged to Claire Bennett." Claire's attorney opened the box Caleb had brought. The paper shift log listed Lucas on the morning crew at Riverside. Assignment messages confirmed that he had been sent to inspect the east platform. The story that he had trespassed onto the site began collapsing in real time, in front of every camera in the room. A technical expert displayed the server logs. Lucas's internship record had been deleted 12 minutes after the ambulance left the construction site. The deletion had been performed through an administrator account connected to Vanessa's legal office. The expert also showed that the safety harness in the official photograph had been altered with a repeated image patch and that the main camera footage had been cut just before the structure failed. Caleb stepped up to the microphone. His hands were shaking, but his voice did not avoid the truth. I signed a false report because I was threatened with losing my job, my health insurance, and my pension. I accept that I must answer for that signature. But Lucas warned us that the bracing was defective. He did not cause the accident. He saved someone. The ballroom doors opened. Miguel entered between two co-workers, one arm still supported by a brace. He looked directly toward the cameras. That person was me. Lucas pushed me out of the collapse zone. If he had run to save himself, I would not be standing here today. The secondary camera footage began playing. Lucas appeared wearing complete internship safety gear, with orange trim on his harness and the company logo clearly visible. He pointed toward a bent brace and shouted for the workers to leave the platform. When the metal connection snapped, Lucas rushed forward and pushed Miguel into the safe zone. The steel structure collapsed onto Lucas seconds later. The ballroom went silent. At the hospital, Lucas turned his face away from the phone. For the first time, the world was seeing him not as a trespasser, but as someone who had placed another person's life ahead of his own. Dr. Grant appeared by video connection. He confirmed that Lucas's spinal injuries were consistent with the crushing force shown in the recording, not with a fall from climbing over a restricted barrier. Mark stepped backward, but the independent attorney had already reached the stage. An email appeared on the screen. In it, Mark acknowledged that Lucas had an internship badge, but suggested using the fact that his onboarding information had not been fully entered into the system as a way to deny the employment relationship. The complete recording of his meeting with Claire proved that Mark had been the one who offered money and an apartment in exchange for her signature. It also showed that he had sent Claire's private financial information to Vanessa without permission. A representative from Mark's law firm stood from the front row. Mr. Collins is suspended effective immediately. This matter will be referred to the Professional Licensing Authority and to investigators handling possible insurance fraud. Mark looked at Claire as though he expected sympathy. She simply closed the evidence box. His final chance had never been about receiving her forgiveness. It had been the moment when he could have chosen the truth. He had chosen not to. The evidence against Vanessa continued. There was the order to delete Lucas's name. There were instructions to alter the photograph. There were messages pressuring Caleb to sign the false report. There was a request to destroy backup records. And there were payments from the Ethan Caldwell fund to a shell company financially connected to one of Vanessa's associates. I was protecting thousands of jobs, Vanessa said. Her voice remained cold, but her hands were clenched. If Riverside collapses, who do you think will pay the price? Margaret stepped in front of Anna's portrait. My daughter-in-law's name was never meant to protect profits by abandoning an injured worker. Jobs are not protected by lies. They are only placed on another foundation that is waiting to collapse. Then Ethan stepped forward. He did not say that Vanessa had betrayed him. He did not call himself a victim. I signed that report after spending 3 minutes reviewing a summary. I gave too much authority to the legal department. I did not examine the original records. I did not verify whether Anna's fund was still serving the people she intended it to serve. He looked at Claire, then toward the camera connected to Lucas. The signature on that lie is mine. I did not create the false evidence, but the power I gave away and my failure to take responsibility turned that lie into an official truth. Ethan apologized to Claire, Lucas, Caleb, Miguel, the Riverside workers, and the donors. He asked the board to investigate his own responsibility as well. He gave up his voting authority and his executive bonus during the reform process. The board suspended Vanessa and locked all of her access immediately. The evidence was transferred to investigators handling insurance fraud, workplace safety violations, and possible criminal charges. Riverside was shut down for a full inspection. The shell company accounts were frozen. The insurance company withdrew its denial. Caldwell Urban guaranteed payment for Lucas's surgery, rehabilitation, and lost income without requiring him to surrender any legal rights. Margaret joined the effort to restore the Anna Caldwell Fund under independent management. The next morning, as nurses prepared to take Lucas into surgery, Claire held his hand so tightly that he smiled and asked her to loosen her grip. "I am sorry," Claire said. "I have been making every decision for you because I was afraid of losing another person I love." Lucas squeezed her hand gently. "I want to live, but I want you to live too, Claire. Do not give up your entire life just to save mine." The operating room doors closed. Several hours later, Dr. Grant came out and removed his mask. The decompression and spinal stabilization procedures had been successful. He warned Claire that Lucas still faced a long recovery. Claire nodded. This time, she did not make promises on Lucas's behalf. She only promised to walk beside him. A few weeks later, Lucas stood inside the physical therapy room with both hands gripping a rehabilitation frame. His legs were shaking violently. Claire stood several steps away. She did not rush forward to catch him. Lucas lifted one foot, then the other. When he looked up, tears were already running down Claire's face, but her smile no longer carried the shape of fear. Ethan returned legal ownership of the wedding dress to Claire through a written agreement with no conditions attached. There was no proposal, no cameras, no emotional debt. Claire used part of Lucas's lawful compensation to repay Rosa for the original loan. She restored the cloth pocket inside the lining, but left the seam designed so it could be opened again. The truth would never be sewn shut again. The dress became the centerpiece of an exhibition called Second Chances. Beside it were stories of workers whose identities had been denied, families who had sold treasured possessions to afford treatment, whistleblowers who had been threatened, and women who had stepped away from careers to care for people they loved. The money raised was managed by an independent board for victims of workplace accidents. Lucas returned to school. He began studying construction safety engineering and joined a council protecting interns and trainees. Claire earned a design scholarship through an open selection process. Bennett Bridal Repairs grew into a training workshop for single mothers, family caregivers, and people returning to work after major life disruptions. Rosa taught basic financial skills to the trainees. Caldwell Urban created an independent whistleblower reporting system. Serious workplace accidents had to be reviewed by an outside board. The chief executive officer could no longer sign a final accident conclusion without original records and worker testimony. The Anna Caldwell Fund published its spending publicly. Riverside workers received medical screenings and compensation. Caleb faced discipline for signing the false report, but he was protected as a cooperating witness and later participated in safety training. Months later, Ethan came to the exhibition alone. No reporters, no entourage. He waited until Claire finished adjusting a fold in the dress before asking if she would have coffee with him after work. Claire looked at him. "Is that a thank you, a debt, or a personal invitation?" "A personal invitation," Ethan said. "I do not want money or guilt deciding what this relationship is called." Claire studied him for a moment, then nodded. "One cup of coffee, not a marriage proposal." The wedding dress remained beneath the lights. It no longer belonged to the man who had walked away from Claire. It was not a reward from a billionaire either. It belonged to the life Claire had fought to reclaim. On the day the exhibition opened, she placed a small sign beside the dress. "This dress never carried me to a wedding. It carried my brother back toward his own 2 feet, and it carried the truth back to where it belonged." Ethan did not change Claire's life by buying the dress or paying a bill. The real change began when he opened the files, accepted responsibility, and repaired the system. And Claire proved that compassion is not measured by what we give away when giving is easy. It is measured by what we are willing to risk so the truth is not left behind.